Hello, I'm Charlotte Walsh. I'm a digital strategist by background and one of the co-founders of Detox, a humanity-led technology agency based in London. We believe that technology should aid people and the planet, and that technology should be the means and not the aim. I've been involved in digital experience design since moving to the UK 20 years ago. And before I made London my home, I grew up in New Zealand, which has a strong and long reputation for being green and for standing up for the environment. And I'm proud that, like New Zealand, Digital Detox is also making a stand. Even though our attention is on the COVID-19 pandemic right now, the issue of climate change hasn't gone away. It is still one of the most critical global challenges facing humanity right now. We know about the Australian wildfires, where 16 million acres of land were on fire and over 1 billion animals were killed. We've become accustomed to news of flooding around the world, and we've seen record temperatures in the Antarctic this year. What we do now and in the next few years will profoundly affect the next few thousand years to come. We have 10 years to avert a climate crisis. This is the decade of action, and this is time we all acted now. We know about the aviation industry and the impact it has on CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. Aviation accounts for 2% of all human-induced CO2 emissions. That's 915 million tonnes of CO2 produced from flights last year. But what about digital? Well, I'm sure it's no surprise that digital's carbon footprint is huge and it's growing. Now, when you turn on your laptop or you open up your mobile phone, you don't see smoke coming out of any holes. But smoke and pollution is happening somewhere. And the question is, can we as designers, as developers and DevOps engineers do more for the environment? If the internet was a country, it would be the 6th largest polluter. It is a little known fact that the internet's CO2 emissions equals the aviation industry's. The average internet page is roughly 2 megabytes in page weight, with video and images making up the majority of this. On average, there are 76 data requests per page. So what causes the energy usage when viewing an internet page? Well, data centres use 30% when preparing and storing data. Networks also use 30% when sending and retrieving the data. And devices use 40% when presenting and viewing the data. Carbon dioxide is emitted every time you perform a search, about 0.2 grams for each search, and it can be up to 7 grams of CO2, which is the same amount of energy used to boil a kettle. There are 63,000 Google searches per second, which equates to 1,000 tonnes of CO2 per day, and we need about 500,000 acres of mature forest to absorb that amount every year, just for Google searches. Emails on average have a carbon footprint of 4 grams of CO2, or up to 50 grams with a heavy attachment. Think of the thousands of unwanted emails we get every day. Think about how many people we're including in an email chain when we reply all. And think about the unwanted marketing emails that you get in your inbox that you never get round to unsubscribing. OVO Energy noted that if every Briton, 60 million people, sent one less thank you email per day, it would save 16,000 tonnes of carbon a year. That's the same as 81,000 flights from London to Madrid. What about data storage? Data centres consume 2% of the world's electricity, and that's expected to reach 8% by 2030. According to research from Hewlett-Packard, only 6% of data ever created is used. That means that 94% is sitting in a vast cyber landfill that keeps on growing. In other words, it will be costing us the equivalent of maintaining the airline industry for data that we don't even use. By 2025, each connected person will have almost 5,000 digital interactions a day. That's 1 every 17 seconds. Now, new technology isn't going away. Modern digital trends are increasing the demand on energy to power our habits. Fresh thinking is required from organisations with both the power and the responsibility to make a difference. There are some great global organisations making an impact and promising change. Microsoft recently announced plans to be carbon neutral by 2030 and to remove historical carbon by 2050. It has introduced a £1 billion climate innovation fund. ING Bank has 34 million customers in 40 countries, and it has been carbon neutral since 2007. And companies like EY and Vodafone are communicating a strong focus on sustainability and climate change. Global internet traffic increased nearly threefold during 2014 to 2018, and similar growth is projected for 2018 to 2022. Wireless and mobile devices will account for more than 70% of total traffic by 2022. Mobile and wireless is more energy intensive than fixed line. However, data transmission network technologies are rapidly becoming more efficient. 5G is expected to make a 5 to 10-fold improvement in that efficiency. But with millions of people streaming video, with millions of connected IoT devices, we still need to be made aware of the data and the network usage. So we as designers and developers can help tackle this digital pollution. So what can you do to make applications and websites more energy efficient? Well, firstly, we need to educate designers and developers to think about sustainability when they are designing, building, and maintaining digital products and services. They need to know what the key decision points are and what impact their choices have. Secondly, we need to measure and analyse. We should know what good looks like. We need to compare against industry norms and best practice, and we need to track improvements. Like energy ratings on appliances, it may not be long before this is demanded by the public or even legislated by governments, so it pays to start thinking about it now. And thirdly, we need to design and build with sustainability in mind. And so how do we do this? Well, a good first step is to create environmentally focused, non-functional requirements. We need to make these standards known across the organisation through training and workshops. And the good news is these environmental standards are closely linked to performance, so it makes absolute sense. We need to make these standards part of our everyday practice. We need to use performance testing tools like Google Lighthouse, and we need to test and learn and understand the impact of different design decisions and different development decisions that we make. Customers are increasingly demanding sustainable products and services. We use energy ratings on appliances or when buying a house, and customers are switching to green energy firms for their home electricity. Energy ratings for apps and hosting providers is already here, and some customers are already choosing according to this. It may not be long before adding an energy rating to your website or an app is expected, if not mandated, and it may even affect your Google ranking. We need to empower people to make greener choices, and that starts with an awareness and knowledge of the choices available. Is dwell time still being used as a measure of success, and should it be? Or when thinking of the environment and the number of clicks and pages viewed and the data and content being sent, should we be getting users to content as quickly as possible, allowing them to complete their task and get out and on with their day? The site structure, search, and content is at play here. We should be looking at metrics and finding those pages with high bounce rates. We should be removing dead-end pages, and we should be making our content as succinct and useful as possible. We all know that a heavy page will take longer to load, and we know this is detrimental to the user's experience. According to Google, the speed a page takes to load is the biggest factor in a user's mobile experience. It's more important than findability, and it's 3 times more important than how visually attractive the site is. And according to Amazon, a 100 millisecond increase in latency equates to a 1% reduction in sales. So along with the potential financial costs to page load times through page weight, there's also a detrimental cost to the environment. So reducing page weight is vital. As we know, one of the biggest culprits in page weight is video. And at times we should be asking ourselves if video is really adding to the experience. If it is needed, think about how many videos are needed. Consider the length of the video. Does it really need to be that long? Are shorter sound bites better? Choose the most efficient file format, like MPEG-4. Think about not auto-playing the video. Instead, play the video on demand when it is selected. And consider summarising key points in text so users don't have to watch the whole thing, and this is helpful for usability anyway. The audio file is often being delivered, it's being streamed, but is hidden, and this adds to the network traffic that may not even be used. It's better to begin the stream only when the user selects it. Images. Think about the number of images on the page. Are they all needed? Are you using the modern, lightweight formats like WebP? These are much smaller file sizes, but still have the needed quality. Files can be reduced from about 1 megabyte to less than 100 kilobytes without any real discernible difference. Black and white images are much lower in file size than colour. Can you use CSS instead of background images for repeat patterns or faded backgrounds? Can you defer loading off-screen images until they are needed via lazy loading techniques? The number and types of fonts can impact page weight. It makes sense to use system fonts that everybody already has on their devices. But as a designer, if you do want to use custom fonts, each font weight you use has its own file. And how many of these font weights do you really need? Some fonts have 9 or so font weights, but you may only be using 2 or 3 of them. And if each weight contributes 200 to 300 kilobytes, it adds up. Fonts have characters for many of the different languages, all adding to the file size. If your site is only in one language, you may not need the 2,000 characters in the file. You may only need 100. Removing weights and characters you don't use can be beneficial. You can fake interactive services, such as chatbots, so that they appear awake even when they aren't. You can pop up a box so it feels like it's live, but it isn't, and you only open the connection once the user interacts with it. Use the cache. If data is only being updated every 5 minutes, don't poll the service every few seconds. And avoid heavy JavaScript frameworks, unnecessary embeds, basically just clear out the waste. Moving on to look at data centres. Carbon emissions from data centres are a factor of 3 things: the number of servers running, the total energy required to power each server, and the carbon intensity of energy sources used to power those servers. So to reduce carbon emissions, use fewer servers, power those servers efficiently, and reduce unnecessary stored data. So let's compare cloud and on-premise hosting. A typical large-scale cloud provider achieves approximately 65% server utilization compared to 15% for on-premise. Why is that? Well, on-premise is often modelled on peak demand, so it is often grossly oversized. Only about a quarter of the servers are needed for cloud compared to on-premise. Large-scale data centres are far more energy efficient as they have modern facilities, modern cooling systems, and workload-optimised equipment. So moving to the cloud makes sense, right? Well, we think it does. However, there can still be wastage when we move to the cloud. Regular operational processes are needed to keep a check on that cloud wastage. Cloud wastage is the overspending on cloud resources. It means that you're paying for resources that are over-provisioned, or they're not required, or they're not configured in the most cost-effective manner. This is money that is being given to cloud providers like AWS, effectively for no reason. Nearly every organisation that uses cloud services has cloud wastage, regardless of the size and scale of the organisation. So how can you tackle cloud wastage? You can check for zombie server instances, a server that's running with no external communications, and you can turn them off. You can right-size underutilised servers. You can even switch off developer instances out of hours when they're not in use. You can reduce on-demand resources and increase reserve instance coverage. And you can move away from annual billing to real-time, more granular control. You can install policies and procedures to constantly monitor and adjust. It's a cultural mind shift, which brings me to my final point. It's important to promote an internal culture that supports sustainable development. We need to increase awareness through training and workshops. We need to normalise behaviour that supports sustainable development. And we need to measure the digital carbon footprint of the products and services being created. We need to publish data internally, possibly even gamify it, and celebrate the successes and the wins. Top-down buy-in is important. It helps that leaders in the organisation are behind the sustainability agenda. It helps to have leadership buy-in to the cause. Companies like EY, RBS, Microsoft and ING are doing just that. Digital Detox can help you determine the state of your organisation's digital carbon footprint. We have developed an offering called the Green Report. And although the focus is environmental, significant potential financial savings can be achieved by reviewing your organisation's digital carbon footprint. And that's a pretty important thing for every organisation right now. The Green Report, which can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to complete, looks at the carbon footprint of your customer using your organisation's services. We look at the carbon footprint of your websites and your code, and we look at your hosting and your cloud infrastructure. And we look at the internal employee engagement that fosters a culture of sustainable development. We completed a cloud review recently for a US tech firm. They had a very mature cloud ecosystem spanning Azure and AWS. The total annual spend on cloud was budgeted at nearly $10 million, but by mid-2019, that spend had spiraled out of control to $16.5 million. We were engaged to help optimize and identify the cause of the problem. We conducted a 3-week usage assessment and identified 63% savings that could be achieved, giving them the potential to reduce their bill down to $6 million, approximately 30% below their budget. So this analysis, the Green Report, makes financial and environmental sense, and every organisation needs every penny and dollar right now. So to recap, we need to educate designers and developers to think about sustainability when they design and build digital services. We need to measure and analyse, and we need to design and build with sustainability and the environment in mind. We need to foster a culture that thinks of and cares about sustainability and the environment. Soon it will become an indicator that people and businesses will use to decide whether they want to do business with you. We need to change behaviour at a company, team and individual level, and we can all make an impact. It helps to have leadership at the top of the company visibly and vocally supporting sustainable development. But you as an individual can make an impact too. And even if you are not a designer or a developer, you can still change behaviour. Bookmark sites you use frequently rather than searching every time. Unsubscribe from those emails you never read. And think about emails and attachments that you send. Have a sort out of your files. Power down devices when you aren't using them. Download instead of stream. These are all things that you could be doing personally as well. If there's one takeaway I'd like you to have today, it's to think lighter. Think about the design, development, and DevOps choices where you can make a difference. Start something in your organisation if it hasn't started already. Thank you.